Okay, so now we're recording, and anybody who isn't able to join us live will get to hear this recording later. So let's begin this conversation by talking about what do we mean when we say tribe? What do most people mean when they say tribe? I always like to go to the dictionary and thesaurus to look things up, and as I looked up, tribe, which, like so many words in the English language, it has many, many different meanings. And thesaurus says the meanings are community or family. But then when you look it up, and there are lots of other synonyms that thesaurus refers to, but when you look it up in the dictionary for the most part says a group with something in common. And I like to add to that particular description, particularly a group that shares common values and beliefs, because I believe that is really an important aspect of how we create tribe. So, if we don't talk about specifically our indigenous ancestors, who of course were tribal peoples, and there are still very many tribal peoples alive here on the planet at this time. They really understand, they live tribe. They live the meaning of tribe every day. That's who they are. So we're not going to talk specifically about the indigenous tribal peoples, because that's not how 95% or more of the population of the world actually lives. We're going to talk more about how the rest of the population lives and how they create tribe. So if we look at, the past couple of hundred years, for instance, particularly in the United States, it is true that tribe was really more synonymous with family or community. People lived in their homes with extended family or the community nearby. Many of you, I'm sure, lived in situations where your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your grandparents, and all of those people were within reach or often a short walk away, and they were part of your tribe. If I think back to my own childhood and adolescence here in the state of Maine in the United States, I grew up in the 50s. I was born in the late 40s, but grew up in the 50s and early 60s, and my adult sisters were married, and they lived nearby, and they had so my nephews and nieces also lived nearby. My grandparents lived with us, and my other grandmother lived just a short walk away. And all my aunts and uncles and cousins and myself and my family, we all went to the same church. My mother talked with her sisters on the phone every single day, whether they had something important to talk about or not. It was a part of their tribal way of being. They had simple conversations like, oh, I'm peeling potatoes for dinner tonight. Oh, Joe has gone fishing today. Are you going to the 8 o'clock mass tomorrow morning? They were in constant contact with each other about the mundane for the most part. Important things, of course, as well at times, but mostly it was mundane conversation. What they had in common with one another was really genetics and a general caring and, in some cases, an actual love for one another. So this is a kind of tribe that thesaurus calls family. And then there's community. Again, going back a few decades, we can easily observe that humans lived in small groupings, in settlements, or areas of a town or a city that were identifiable or characterized in some way by the makeup of the group, whether that was ethnic, cultural, religious, socioeconomic, or whatever. I lived in Boston for quite a few years as an adult, so I think of Boston as an example, where, this great city has so many neighborhoods. There's the North End, which is predominantly Italian. And then there's the South End, which is predominantly Irish, Lebanese, and Greek. And then there's Roxbury, which is predominantly African American. And then there's the East End, which is predominantly Hispanic and Brazilian, and so on and on. You know, those are small communities within the larger city, and those would classify as like, you know, a tribal kind of sense because they come together, they share in common an ethnicity or a racial or cultural connection. You know, in the small city that I grew up in here in Maine, Westbrook is where I grew up, and that city was divided by a river. And one side of the river was Franco-American Catholic, and the other side of the river was, and the Franco-American Catholic side, of course, was also French-speaking. We spoke both French and English. And then there was the other side of the river, which was Anglo. There were two separate Catholic churches, and then, of course, there were many other churches as well. But, you know, in terms of the Catholic upbringing, there was the French church and there was the regular Anglo church. And people did not mix one across the other. We had our tribe on our side of the river, and then the other side of the river had its own tribe. And the only place that ever got mixed up was when people met in middle school or high school. Until that time, people were pretty separated, even though we were in the same city. So, you know, certainly there are pockets of places, you know, here in the United States that still are very much characterized by that kind of community, even though it is, you know, really beginning to wane. You can think, for instance, about the Amish people. That's one idea that comes to mind, a closely knit community bound by, you know, socioeconomic or other common factors, such as age. But in general, these small communities are no longer the norm of life in America. And in countries other than the United States, we can find these close communities and families living in compounds or near one another. But nonetheless, these are becoming less common over time. They've become a global community. And regardless of your roots, in all likelihood, your family is scattered around the world. Your community no longer has a prevalent ethnic or religious flair. And even if you live in a gated community or a senior housing complex, you probably do not know your neighbors in the same ways that were common 50 or more years ago. So when we look at this, we see that there's another social and tribal need that has been eradicated in the lives of many of us by virtue of the fact that we no longer belong to an established church or religious organization. You can see from this slide that statistics show that only 20% of Americans actually go to church. 4,000 churches will close their doors this year, and 2.7 million church members will fall into inactivity this year. So that leaves a huge gap in how people traditionally got together in a tribal kind of community to worship, pray, and you know, do good works in the community and so on. So, you know, statistics surely do bear the truth that more and more, especially with younger adults, they do not identify or participate in a church community. And, you know, at one time, as I said, the membership in a church provided a sense of tribal identity, and it filled a need for creating community where there were shared beliefs, which is where I'm going with this, shared beliefs. Coming together to sing, pray, celebrate had some meaning, no matter how boring or repetitive it was. It created a hub of sorts to which members could return weekly or more frequently in some cases to be reminded that they belong. Even if in the fringes they had a sense of belonging. What church do you belong to was often a question. So don't get me wrong, I'm not an advocate for the return to this way of living, because it had its shadow side. You know, your family was in your back pocket, your neighbors knew everything you were doing. You know, good or bad. Everybody knew we were coming and going and what was going on. And, so it wasn't all like a positive thing. You see the cat looking through the blinds out the window here. I'm sure some of you had neighbors who did that kind of thing, like, oh, looking out the blinds. Oh, she's getting home late. I wonder where she went. You see, as humans, most of us, at least most of us, have a primal need for belonging. And we all want to fit in somewhere, be it part of a pack or a group or a community of people who share something in common with us. The need for belonging does not go away as our families and neighborhoods disperse and become less and less a part of how we identify with ourselves. And so I ask you, who is in your tribe? Given that your family and childhood neighborhoods or a church no longer feed your need to belong, how do you feel this need to belong in today's daily life? So let's pause for a second here and talk again briefly about, the definition of tribe that I referred to earlier, which is a group with something in common. That something in common does not necessarily have anything to do with your age, your socioeconomic background or history, your race, your ethnicity, your marital status, your gender identification, your sexual identity. It more than likely, given today's social structure, is about more like a purpose or a goal you have in common with a group of people. And that also has a pull, a sense of urgency, or a bona fide sense of at least an emotional life or death kind of belief. And, it isn't about life or death in the physical plane, but certainly about an emotional life or death, a deep connection that is truly a necessity to your well-being. Because I was interested in this topic of tribe, I recently read Sebastian Junger's latest book, which he simply titled Tribe. And I like the book. I don't agree with it all, but, he postulates that one of the most common ways a tribe in today's world is created is through the formation of military groups, especially those deployed outside of the United States and those actively engaged in war activities. And then other groups of people whose lives depend upon one another for survival. And he also talked about, I really enjoyed this part of the book where he talked about how the wars between the early settlers and the native peoples led to oftentimes white people being kidnapped by the native peoples and, held supposedly against their will. But that is it. Some of those people, given the opportunity to leave their the tribe being released, decided they actually liked it better in tribal life and stayed with the native people rather than returning to their villages. So that gives you some idea how really, really strong the pull for tribal connection is. So, as I said, I really like Junger's book, but I don't agree with all of his hypotheses without reservation. I do think it is true that men and women who are deployed into harm's way and whose lives depend upon one another do indeed create tribes. It's undoubtable. There's no way you can doubt that truth. Because they sleep together, they eat together, they play games together, they depend upon one another for their safety. It's, in fact, for their lives, the actual physical lives and protection. And he also hypothesizes that there are a lot of soldiers who suffer from PTSD despite not ever having been in action in wartime. That the mere separation from their tribe, from their comrades who they lived with for a period of time, who they ate with, who they slept with, who they played games with, and so on, that mere separation creates a state of PTSD because they return to a world where there is no tribe. They lose that connection to their bona fide buddies, the people that they bonded with in a deep way and for whom they shared a tremendous purpose. I also like what he has to say about World War II Europeans who lived in bomb shelters for days and days on end, and who shared food and sleep space, and at the same time also suffering and fear, as well as laughter and songs and stories and childcare and shared books. And again, interestingly enough, studies have shown that the survivors of these bomb shelters, when asked, would they ever have a desire to return to that kind of living, often have a melancholy kind of sense of remembering the ways in which they felt so bonded to the people with whom they shared that space. And even though there was a lot of suffering, a lot of fear, and lack of adequate food and so on, there's a desire there to return to that environment, to that deep bonding, to that sense of tribe, because they were a group that had something in common with one another. Their physical survival through the night, avoiding starvation, fear, anger, discomfort, and caring for one another's lives and protecting the children was a really, really important part of how they created tribes. So where I don't agree with Junger is that I don't think that these are the most common methods of how we create tribe today in our current modern times. You see, we're actually creating tribes for ourselves on a regular basis, and often without noticing or celebrating the importance of this tribal creation and the valuable role it plays in our overall health and well-being. And furthermore, how it really feeds our need or sense of belonging. If we do not have a tribe, then we surely long for the presence of this in our lives, without always recognizing what it is exactly that we're missing. Oftentimes, people who don't have those kinds of close connections feel perhaps even desperate, lonely, sometimes hopeless, lost, orphaned, disconnected, without an anchor. Those are just a few emotional results that could happen as a result of not having a tribe. We try to fix this feeling if we don't have a tribe. We try to fix it in a variety of ways. We might overeat. We might overindulge in alcohol or drugs, or binge on movies, or be fixated to social media, which is a today very common fix for this vacuum that's left by lack of tribe. So let's get down to the subject of this webinar. How do you create tribe in these modern times? And how can you identify who is in your tribe? So here's a few thoughts that I've had about this that might help sort this out for you. You want to begin by thinking about what are your core beliefs about spirit, God, goddess, the universe, whatever name you want to give to these higher sense of being. What is your belief in spirit? What is your belief in God or the universe? And who in your life currently shares these beliefs? Who can you call on when you're in pain or in grief? Who do you want to be with you when you celebrate your birthday or some other significant passage? What are your values on these topics? For instance, the environment, sexual identity or gender equality, the equality of all beings, animals, plants, humans, caring for the aged, the poor, the immigrants, money, kindness, generosity. What are your values about all of these things? Because those define a whole lot about who you are. What are your beliefs? And who, based on what I was saying earlier in the earlier slide, who in your life right now shares these beliefs? And who can you call on when you're in pain or in grief? Who do you really want to show up with your whole self to celebrate your birthday, right? Because sometimes celebrating your birthday with your family of origin is not really feeding your soul. It's feeding a need for your family to show up. It's more important that you trust who is in your tribe based on who do you share your values with. So these are all spaces within yourself where you can begin to identify with whom you want to belong. Who feeds your soul when you are in their company? Who challenges you to dig deeply into your soul's longings? Who celebrates your achievements, whether they're small or large? It doesn't matter. An achievement might be, I'm recovering from surgery, and today I was able to actually drive to the grocery store. People in your tribe would celebrate that with you. Who cheers for you when you get a new job or you go on a spectacular vacation? Who can you trust with your vulnerabilities? That is really, really important because, your vulnerabilities, your secrets, your fears, if you can't share those with people who are around you, then they're not your tribal people. You need to be able to open your heart wide and allow the people in your tribe to see all of who you are, your vulnerabilities, your secrets, your fears, when you get angry, when you're sad, when you're in grief. Those are the people who are potential candidates for you to call, these are my tribe. And who do you want to eliminate from your tribe? My suggestion would be that you want to run away from the following people. Anyone who shames you, gone, out the door. I don't want to sound like Trump here. Out. You're fired. Anyone who blames you for their misfortune or their problems. You're not to blame for anybody else's problems. Anyone who is jealous or envious of you. That person who can't celebrate with you when you go on a fabulous vacation because they're so envious of you that they can't join you in that magic, in that celebration of having had a wonderful time. Anyone who you cannot be honest with or transparent with about your beliefs, your sexuality, your fears, or your joys. Those are not candidates for people to be in your tribe. Anyone who makes fun of you or puts you down. And I include in that anyone who uses sarcastic humor in a way that diminishes you or others, which I find to be absolutely, unequivocally abusive. Those are not people who are in your tribe. If somebody's making fun of you, they're putting you down, they're using sarcastic humor to make fun of you, they are not a part of your tribe. You cannot trust your heart with them. You cannot be clear. You cannot be transparent. You cannot be all of who you are. You can't show up 100% with those people. They're not a part of your tribe. Maybe they're a part of your life because you have no choice. They're not a part of your tribe. And then, of course, you want to eliminate anybody who is physically or sexually abusive of you or has been physically or sexually abusive of you in the past. You may have to rub elbows with them from time to time because they're a family member, but you do not ever want to have them be a part of your tribe. You can't open your heart to them. And last, I like to say, if your heart hurts when you're with someone, do not add them to your tribe. They're not trustworthy. They're not people who you can really be with in a trusting way and therefore are not your tribal people. So the places you can seek out tribal connections are the places where you might go to feed your soul. That's where you go. For instance, for those of us who practice shamanism, maybe a drumming circle, a group of men or women or others who gather to celebrate the moon or the cycles of the earth, or a circle of women or men who gather to celebrate their spiritual joy or any kind of ceremony. Or perhaps you find your tribal connections at gatherings of people who sing or play music, or who dance, or who celebrate life, not in a place of competition, not singing competition, not dancing competition, but people who just love life and want to enjoy the specialness of the life in a very vibrant way, being out in nature, going on a hike, going on a vision quest. As I said before, drumming circles. Sometimes we like to have women's retreats or men's retreats. Those are places where you can bond. You might be able to find, people who you can hold in your tribe in larger memberships, like, groups of people who work on behalf of the environment or human rights or gender equality. But, beware that not everybody in those groups is necessarily going to share your spiritual values. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about our tribal people being those who really share our spiritual values, whether they're from the same race or socioeconomic background or ethnicity or whatever. If they share our spiritual beliefs, then we have this common bond that is tribal, that is a very important part of how we can manage to stay together despite perhaps other differences of opinions. And even sometimes people find tribal members, with others who enjoy, recreational or fitness challenges such as, yoga or meditation classes or Reiki shares or other kinds of things. So in summary, what I'm saying here is that you need to feel met and you need to feel safe on all levels, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally when you are with your true tribe. If you don't feel that, then you're not with your tribe, and the people who are gathering together are not your people. There may be some other people in your world who are in the periphery of your tribe, and of course, there's always, your family. But your family is forever a part of your tribe, and yet we often don't feel safe with family members. You can relate to them because, after all, they are related. But do not succumb to the belief that they are your one and only tribe, because they are not your one and only tribe. I've found in my experience that there are a lot of people right now who, because of the ways that we are so separated from one another, tend to cling to family as their true tribe and don't step out of that. And so I'm not saying your family is not your tribe, but expand on that. It's really important to the growth and the evolution of your soul that you have a tribe that you can trust, that you can rest with, that you can celebrate with, that you can feel held by, who you can trust your biggest secrets with, and who you love, and who love you unconditionally. Unconditionally. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you can ski or walk or speak the English language even. If there is unconditional love, then there is somebody who is potentially in your tribe. And I want to say that sometimes tribe gets created for a short period of time. It isn't necessarily forever, I'm thinking, as an example, about a gathering of women that I just was recently on a retreat with this summer. There were 10 of us. And we hiked, and we went swimming, and we made meals and ate together, and we cleaned the kitchen, and we drummed, and we danced, and we sang, and we laughed, and we told stories. We created ceremony for 4 days and 3 nights. Now, there was an incredible amount of deep love and appreciation for each other. There was humor. There was celebration. There was equality on all levels. and a true honoring of each other in all ways. People who felt like they needed to spend the afternoon by themselves, nobody was judging that. This was what this time was about. It was about we come together and we honor each other as individuals and meet our individual needs. So, and some of us knew each other previously, and some people came on this retreat and they knew nobody. They knew nobody before coming. And yet, we all left feeling fed and met and loved and celebrated and honored and equal and filled with joy and a renewal as well as deep rest. We created tribe for a short while. I would bet money that each one of us will remember this as a tribal moment, and that we will rest, that this idea that this time will really rest easy in our minds for the rest of our lives. We may never be together again in this particular configuration. It doesn't matter, because what we experienced was true tribe, and this tribe will live forever in our hearts. So this kind of tribe has tremendous value to the soul and to the overall well-being of each of our lives, because it lives on in perpetuity. The circle exists in another reality, and those who are there can tap into it at will. This is tribe. This is what you can create in your life for a day, a week, a month, a year, or for decades. It is rich, it is full, and we all need it. I want to leave you today with an idea that I have pondered for some time, that I'm going to explore a lot more during the coming winter months. And it's an idea that has come to me in spirit through some of my journeys, because I see so many people who are suffering greatly because of a lack of deep spiritual connection with others, the lack of tribe. They have family, they maybe have, co-workers that they're connected with, that they have coffee with from time to time, or what have you. They don't really have tribe. And so my idea is to create a short-term tribe in a virtual reality kind of environment, so that people who live in areas of the U.S. or even here in the state of Maine, where the winter is long and dark, you probably all know too well how isolating the winter months can be. So my thought is to gather people for a 24-hour period in a virtual reality kind of way, like probably through this forum, through Join Me. And during this period of time, I'll be leading people in a variety of different exercises which will help us create community, even though we won't be in physical reality with one another. We'll be working on some common spiritual exercises that I'll lead, and I'll also create some ways that we can connect with one another through this non-ordinary virtual reality. So this process is in the making. It's forming in my mind, and Carrie and I are going to be working on developing the template and the content during the next couple of months, and we'll be keeping you informed about it. There probably will be a small cost associated with it, because, we have to cover our time in creating and executing this event. However, I don't want to make it so overly costly that people don't feel that they can join. So stay tuned, and I hope that we can be offering you this opportunity, particularly during the winter months. So I'd like to end our time together today with an opportunity for you to ask questions. Any question that might be in your mind and heart on this topic of tribe, or any other question that you may have about this or anything else. So you know how to use the chat box, right? There's a little space, there's like a little bubble above on the top part of your screen, and you can go to that bubble and click on it and type in a question, and Harry and I will be able to see your question, and I will do my best to answer any question you have. So please, chime in. Any question, even if it's not about tribal life. is where we play the elevator music. It could also be rattling, but my rattle is out of reach. While you guys are all thinking, I just want to go back and reflect for a minute on how touched I am by the stories of the ways in which, the people who lived in bomb shelters during the Second World War in Europe bonded so deeply that even decades later they have a certain melancholy for that time, despite the fact that it was characterized by great fear and anxiety, and but yet they were together, they were bonded, they had a common purpose and common beliefs, and their common belief in that case was that they could survive and that they could protect their children and they would make it through the night. And that common belief got them through and created an amazing community or tribe for themselves. So I'm not seeing any questions forthcoming, and that's fine. There is no requirement that you ask questions. If you, after we hang up, think of a question that you have that you wished you had asked during this webinar, then feel free to email me with the question, and I'll do my best to answer you. And I look forward to. Wait a minute, somebody has asked a question. What does one do when one feels mostly part of a tribe but not entirely of it? Well, that's a really great question. So you might be, you might feel like, yeah, I'm kind of a part of this circle of people, but I sort of feel like I've got one foot in and one foot out. What I would suggest is that, you keep connected to that circle of people, whoever they are, and over time, assess for yourself whether this is really working. Does this feel right to you, or are you feeling not entirely a part of this tribe because there's something going on that is, there's some exclusivity or some kind of, junior high little group going on that leaves you in the sidelines. That doesn't feel good. That feels really kind of yucky. So, if that's part of what's going on that makes it such that you're not entirely in, then you might really want to question whether you want to continue staying connected to that particular group, or even confront, some of the other members of this quote tribe about, what is it that isn't fitting for you, so that you can get a better sense of whether there's something you need to shift, or if that's something that you would have to shift is something that you're really not willing to do. So, yes, it's a great question. It's a great question. I think we all at times have these situations where we belong to a group and we feel like, yeah, I'm a part of this group, but not really, because I often feel left out. And that's not a good feeling. So my estimation, my opinion would be that if you're feeling kind of yucky about it and feeling left out, then that's not your tribe. And then somebody else is asking, what's the difference between a tribe and a clique? Well, that is exactly the same thing. A clique is when a group of people get together and they're so exclusive that they don't let anybody else in. That's not tribal, because tribal people really, they're close-knit, they have a common purpose, they want to achieve perhaps a common goal, they share common beliefs, and yet if they're so closed that there is no room for another to enter, then they may be a tribe, but they're a closed tribe. And if that's the truth, then what they need to do is actually acknowledge that. Like, we're a tribe, but we're not open to new members. This is who we are, and we love each other, and we're doing this work together, and we appreciate that you have interest in us, but we're not accepting any new tribal members right now, and that's okay. But if you're on the periphery of this kind of a situation, then get out, because you're part of, there's a clique happening here. You're not being accepted in it. I would say get out. It's not your tribe. So I want to thank Carrie for the astonishingly great slideshow. She does a phenomenal job of putting this together for me. I just give her the narrative, and she finds these amazing images that really express in a visual kind of way what it is I am conveying. And so it's the combination of the two of us that make this really possible, and I want to make sure that you all know that she plays a significant role in this work. And she's saying here, you could thank Spirit. Well, I do thank Spirit, because Spirit is who brought me and Terry and this concept and this work together. And Spirit, of course, is the one to be thanked for all of this work. All of my inspiration comes from Spirit. It doesn't come from my head. Trust me, I'm not that smart. So I end this time by saying goodbye for now. Thank you so much for participating. And, you'll have the recording in your mailbox probably before the end of this day, or at least before the end of this evening. And feel free to listen to it again or share it with others. That's completely fine if you want to share it with others. There's no requirement that you keep it secret. So be well, and look forward to seeing you again at the webinar that we're doing here later in the month of August. If I were smart, I would actually have that date right out front of me, but I don't. So it's sometime later in August, and you will be getting a notice about it by email. Look forward to chatting with you again. Thank you, and goodbye for now.